about what I call the lay of the land. This is the area of the Bible. We're talking about Egypt, the Sinai Peninsula, Canaan, modern Syria, Iraq, and Iran. This is all a desert. Now, where are we today? We are right there, which means if we go east, you're in the desert all the way over to Kuwait. And so this narrow little strip of green, this is off of Google Earth, incidentally. If you aren't using Google Earth, you are missing out on one of the great thrills. Anytime you go on a trip to any kind of a city or a country, they now have 3D representations of all the, you can fly around cities, you can see where your hotel is located, you can even get a street view of your hotel.
What is that?
It's called Google Earth.
Google Earth.
Oh, Google.com.
Google Earth, yeah. If you haven't done it, you're missing out. Now, this is a photograph, incidentally, that was taken by the fellow that launched the Hubble telescope. My son was a Marine pilot, and his commanding officer at one point was the fellow who went up in the space shuttle, and he took that picture himself. Well, that's better. He took that picture, he lay in the window of the shuttle for 2 weeks, and I can't imagine anything more fun than that. But this is, over here we have Egypt. This is north to the left, south to the right, east to the west. And there you have Canaan, up the coast of the Mediterranean, and that needs to be moved over to there. I don't know why that happened. And then Mesopotamia. So, it's a big land, but there isn't a whole lot of area in which people can live. And if you look at it from the perspective of its development, this is the Arabian Peninsula, and long ago, as it moved forward, it created mountain ranges, and of course it's against the Mediterranean here, and as it moved up, it created impassable, unlivable areas early on. And what happened was it created a huge crack that's called the Great Rift. We've been driving up and down the Great Rift for the last 2 days. It starts in Turkey, ends up down in the Serengeti Plain. It's a crack that's about 40 miles inland, and it has affected everything that's happened historically and culturally in this part of the world. There are 2 rivers that formed along the north end there. That's the Tigris and the Euphrates, and early on they were joined down at the bottom, but the Persian Gulf extended north a little bit into that area and created 2 separate regions, but this is called Mesopotamia, and it means the area between the rivers, Mesopotamia, which makes a lot of sense. This is where the ancient cultures developed by and large. This is an impassable area, uninhabitable. That's the Arabian Desert until modern times. Irrigation and oil. Now we have Saudi Arabia there. But in early times, nobody could or would live there. This is the Sahara Desert. Nobody could or would live there. These are mountain ranges over along the side of India where people really didn't want to live for a long time. These areas are impassable. And of course the Himalayas and the areas over in that, this is the Iranian Plateau, and then the Himalayas. As a result, the very first groups of people grew up in Mesopotamia and in Egypt, and over in the Indus River. Eventually they filled in the Aegean up there with the Minoans, and eventually Canaan showed up, and eventually Rome showed up, but you can see they're slowly working their way from the earliest areas, and then eventually lots and lots of nasty tribes, Orthogoths, Visigoths, all kinds of different groups. And if you look at when that happened, 3500 BC, this is 2,000 years prior to Abraham, culture appeared. 3000 BC, that's in Egypt, that's about 1500 years prior to Abraham. The pyramids were built 1,000 years before Abraham. The world was an old place before the Bible started. 2,500 years over there in the Indus River area, 2000 BC up in the Aegean around Greece and Crete and the Minoans and eventually the Mycenaeans. 1500 BC up in Turkey. Stonehenge was founded about the time of the pyramids, 1,000 years before Abraham. It was an old place. And then the Romans are very, very latecomers. And we're going to talk about all these different groups coming together in Canaan as we travel around, and we still have these nasty tribes. Okay, let's take a look at this in detail, the ancient Near East. If you want to build a city, what do you have to have?
Water.
Water, absolutely. If you have water, you can grow food. But to grow food, what do you have to have?
Land.
Arable land. You have to have a place where you can grow things, and there's not a whole, you've been driving around, you haven't seen a whole lot of arable land. The most fertile land we saw was this afternoon at Arrowhead. All that brown earth, all kinds of crops. You have to be able to defend your city, and you want to be able to grow enough extra food or make things that other people want that you can then trade. And if you want to trade from this city to this city, what do you have to have? You have to have you have to have routes of trade and communication that allow you to share knowledge and to share products. There aren't very many places in the ancient world that have all of these things, and that's where the big cities are located. They were founded there 5,000 years ago, and they're still there today because it's the same spot where you can get these various products. So let's take a look here. We have the rivers over there in Mesopotamia. The very first cultures formed over there. We also have predictable water supplies in Egypt. 2 places, and that's it, Mesopotamia and Egypt. Canaan doesn't have any. Dr. Collins was talking about perennial rivers. Those are tiny little dried up ponds and creeks in the summertime, even though there's still water there. They are not running rivers like the Nile and the Tigris and Euphrates. We have the Great Arabian Desert. Mesopotamia began its cultures first. They had writing before anybody else. We read about them in the Bible. Eventually, Egypt formed its cultures. We read about them in the Bible. And finally, about 1,000 years later, up in Turkey, all the good land was taken. They began to fill in the areas in between. And we have cultures up in Anatolia, such as Hittites. We read about them in the Bible. And the Canaanites, kind of latecomers. Why? Because there's not a whole lot here. There's no oil, no natural resources, very little land. So this is not a particularly desirable area, but there were people living there. Now that creates a huge problem for the Canaanites because you cannot travel across that desert. If you're in this area or in Egypt and you want to go over here, you can't go through the desert. You have to go this way. That's a long distance. And so the first cultures over here were Sumerians and then Akkadians, not in the Bible. Very old Babylonians, and then more Assyrians and more Babylonians. Those are the guys in the books of Kings. But that's a resurgence and a recovered culture. The original Babylonians were probably prior to the time of Abraham, and that's probably the culture from which he sprang, he and his people, from Babylon. Eventually the Egyptian culture appeared about 3000 BC. Again, that's 1,500 years prior to Abraham. And they never changed. They were in control there. They're still in control there. The same culture, basically. And then the Hittites and the Hurrians, we don't hear about them in the Bible. We don't hear about the Mitanni. But these folks we do hear about. There were cultures up in there. And where we are today, the land of Canaan, the land of purple dye. Now, this is called the Fertile Crescent. Why is it called that? Because that's the only place where you can live. And it's shaped kind of like a crescent, and scholars love to use fancy terms, and so they call it the Fertile Crescent, which is kind of a silly term. If you're at a cocktail party and you're talking about culture and history and so forth, it sounds more impressive to use those kinds of academic terms. If you look at this land where the ancient culture showed up in 3000 BC and superimposed the modern Middle Eastern states, this is what you get. Same place, except for Saudi Arabia, and that's still all desert, nobody lives there, but they have oil out there. But look at this, all the modern states are located in the same places they were 3000, 4000 BC, because those are the only places to live. And they're still here in Canaan. Now, the problem for the Canaanites is that if you have the desert filling up this whole area, The land of Canaan is bounded on the east by the desert. Actually, that should be a bigger oval that goes all the way over to here. Here's where we are right now. We're on the edge of the desert. We drove down the edge of the desert yesterday. You have the Mediterranean on the east side. So if you're in Israel, you can't go west, you're in the water. So if you want to go from Mesopotamia and take your trade goods to Egypt, or vice versa, you have to go through Canaan. We have this narrow little land between the Mediterranean and the desert. It's about 40 miles wide, and that's the trade routes. That's the only place you can go. So what does that mean? It means it's the most strategic, valuable land in this part of the world, and so all of the battles of ancient time took place in Canaan. Because whoever controls Canaan controls the world, the ancient world at the time. The Egyptians came up here and tried to get it. The Mesopotamians tried to get it. We have a bunch of little kingdoms at one point, such as Amorites and Ammonites and Hittites and Moabites and Edomites and Termites and Perizzites. We have all of these different groups trying to control that area. And actually, there are Perizzites, not parasites. Termites I made up. Okay, so the other problem is we've got the Great Rift. That's a huge barrier going east and west across the rift. We saw it today from Mount Nebo. It looked at where we stood above Mount Nebo, you can get across the rift to Jericho and up to Jerusalem. You go north, you have to go 25 miles before there's another road that'll get you across. You can go south of the Dead Sea, but why would you want to do it? There's nothing down there. So there are only a couple of ways to get across the Great Rift, and we are going to go across one of them tomorrow when we cross over at Beit Shan, up south of the Sea of Galilee. Here's the Great Rift. This is what it looks like. Now, where are we located? We are right there right now. This is Amman here. Here's the Sea of Galilee. All of the rain that flows into this area falls into this trough. It's a big collecting basin. And water that comes off of Mount Hermon up there flows into that area, and that's what provides these pools of water. We have the Sea of Galilee up there, we have the Jordan River running downhill into the Dead Sea. So all of the water from that area ends up there, and getting back and forth across that is tough. Ancient cultures didn't bother with it because there's nothing over here. Why would you take a trade caravan down through all the, you saw what the hills look like. We drove up things today. Why would you walk 1,000 camels up the side of that when there's nothing up on top? There were no towns. The city of Amman was a tiny little, probably 15-acre city. Steve was talking about city sizes today. There's nothing up there. So what did they do for the, there's the Sea of Galilee, there's the Jordan River, and there's the Dead Sea. And the city of Hammam is located right there. Sodom and Jericho is right there. So you could get across at this point. And Abraham probably went across up at that point. And those are the only two areas along the entire rift that are really convenient to go from one side to the other. So the point is, this rift is a huge natural barrier, and it determined where the cultures developed. Can't go across it very easily. So what do? Oh, there's another ridge in there. We're going to spend a week driving up and down this ridge of cities in Israel. All of the ancient cities of our Christian Bible are located along here. Shechem, Jerusalem, Bethel, Hebron, Beersheba, they're all located along that ridge there. So that's where we're going to be. And the trade routes went like that. They went up the coast. So if the trade routes are going up the coast and that's where all the camels are and that's where the money is, where do you build the big cities? Up the coast. And that's where all these ancient Canaanite cities are located, except for a problem. The ridge up there is hard to get through. There are two passes. We will drive through one of them. And so the trade routes headed up the coast, as you see there, and they cut across. The easiest place to get across the rift is just north of the Sea of Galilee. That's the highest place in the rift. It's still down into the Sea of Galilee, but it's easy to get down there and cross over, and then you head across this big city right up there, Damascus. We're going to be within 50 miles of Damascus when we drive across. And we don't go there. No, that's in Syria. But there are also some side trade routes that work their way around up through there, but basically This is where the trade routes were located. There was nothing up here. That's the Appalachia of ancient Israel. And there's a road that goes up north and south on the east side. We've been on it. We were on it today. States Highway. There was a gravel highway that went from city to city, but there wasn't much. You could get across through there. That's what the Nabateans did. They created a route to get from Petra over to the sea so they could sell their stuff. And there is one road that goes right up the spine here. It's called the Patriarchal Highway because it goes from Shechem down to Jerusalem, down to Bethlehem, down to Hebron, down to Beersheba, and down into the desert. And there are a couple of roads that go across. Oh, right here in the foothills. This is Israelite territory. This eventually became Philistine territory. And in the junction between the two, there's a road. You have the foothills starting up. You have the ocean plain, the beach plain. And there are some roads that cut across there. If you want to get from this area up to Jerusalem, there's one road. There's only one other road that goes up easily to get into the upper areas. And that particular road leads up basically to south of Bethlehem. And so when the Philistines wanted to fight the Israelites, where did they fight their battle? They fought them right there. That's where they could move their armies to. That's the Elah Valley. That's where David fought Goliath. These are the only roads that are really convenient. And there's one road that leads across. We drove down that road today from Mount Nebo, basically down to the north end of the Dead Sea. That's where our excavation is located. Why is there a big city named Sodom located at that spot? All the trade routes on that side come together at that point where there's water and you can go east and west, and it was a major commercial center. And on the other side was Jericho. That's why they were there. There's water and convenience.
Hey, John?
Yes?
From a scale perspective, those east-west...
15 miles from Jerusalem down to Sodom. 15 miles from Sodom up to Ammon. 40 miles from Jerusalem to the coast. Maybe 100 miles. This is a 40-mile sea. 10 miles wide, 40 miles long. I mean, it's little.
Just to help from what we did today, are you going to mention the rivers on the side we were on today?
No, not in this.
Where were we today over here?
Oh, this is where we were today. This great big river right there. And see this little V here?
Yes.
That's where the dam was located.
Okay.
This little space right here is Moab. Between this river and that river. That's Moab.
What's the bottom river?
This is that Zered that Steve was talking about, but we don't agree that that's Zered. If it's not the Zered, then we don't know what, there's no name for it right now. Because that was called the Zered by scholars a long time ago. But this little territory, the south end of the Dead Sea, that's Moab. That's it. This is Edom down here. This area in here where we are, the Amorites, all right. And then further north up here, tomorrow we're headed up along this road into this area where the city of Ammon is located. We're going to skirt Ammon, but that's where the Ammonites were located. And then we're going to cross over right up there at a place called Beit Shan. Neat spot, one of my favorite spots. Sue?
John, why for so many years have they been looking for Sodom and Gomorrah on the side?
Why were they looking for Sodom down here? Because there was a scholar named Albright in the 1920s. He knew everything. He was the world's authority on Near Eastern archaeology, and somebody said, where's Sodom? He said, if we're ever going to find it, we're going to find it south of the Dead Sea. Nobody bothered to read the Bible. And if Albright said it, he's right. So he was just a step below God at that time. So we've had 100 years of scholars looking down in this area for Sodom. They never found it, and that's why they concluded it doesn't exist. Haven't found it. I was at a party, and they said, what are you digging up? I said, we found Sodom. I was really pleased. I thought he'd be impressed. And he said, well, it can't be Sodom. I said, why not? He said, because it doesn't exist. And I said, well, how do you know that? He said, because it's never been found. And I said, we found it. He said, well, it can't be Sodom because it doesn't exist. I mean, but that's the state of the academic understanding of Sodom today. So anyway, Steve has shown that it was up there. That's where the Bible says it was. That's what, there's nothing down here. It's a desert. It's called the Arabah, but it's a desert. There are no cities of the plain down there. There's no water. There's nothing. So anyway, these are the Canaanite cities that are located up the coast. Megiddo. We're going to go to Megiddo. What's Megiddo? Armageddon. We're going to stand on Armageddon. Of course, it blew up in 2000 A.D. I guess we missed it. Everybody said it was going to come in 2000. We're going to go to Megiddo. Here's Ashdod, Ashkelon. What's south of Ashdod? Gaza. We're not going there. Gaza is located right there, and they've been shelling Ashkelon with their little missiles. They fired 10,000 of them in prior to this last incursion. That's down in this area. We are going to restrict ourselves to this area. Hatzor, major city. It was attacked by the Israelites. It was a coalition of armies up to the north that were fought by Joshua and the Israelites. And further up, Damascus. Why Damascus? Because there's a spring coming down out of the mountains. That's on the trade routes. Perfect spot for a city, right? All the economy goes by. You trade, buy and sell. And then Shechem, Jerusalem, Hebron, Beersheba, Bethlehem's located right there. All of the cities of our Bible are located up here in the hill country. Canaanites were down there. The Israelites were up here. And we'll talk about that in another evening if you want to. To get up to Jerusalem, you had to go past another big Canaanite city called Gezer. What's the name of the city that the Egyptian Pharaoh gave to Solomon when he married his Egyptian princess? It was Gezer. It was a Canaanite city. The Egyptians controlled that. They controlled the coast. And when Solomon married his Canaanite or his Egyptian princess, he was given a city as a wedding gift. Not a bad deal. Lachish, one of the neatest spots in, I say that about everything, one of the neatest spots in a major Canaanite city that became an Israelite city. And you read about that with Babylon and Assyria in the book of Kings. And then we have Ammon over there. It was a tiny little spot. That's where David was campaigning while he was up on the patio watching Beersheba take her bath down below. His armies were campaigning over there at Ammon. And Jericho, and then most importantly, Sodom. Okay? You can see why they're there. That's what they're on the roads. Now, what did Solomon do? He fortified 3 cities. We read about it. When he became king, he fortified the city of Megiddo, the city of Hatzor, and the city of Gezer. Why does the Bible tell us he fortified those 3 cities? Because they're the most important strategic cities to protect his highlands that there are. Hatzor controls the trade routes to the north, Megiddo controls the pass through the mountains there, and Gezer protects the approach up to Jerusalem. Makes a whole lot of sense. We're going to see Megiddo, we're going to see Hatzor, we're going to drive past Ammon, we're going to see Sodom. We've looked at Jericho, we don't go there anymore. It's really, unfortunately, the archaeological site's fallen apart. So, anyway, that's what we're going to do. We're going to drive north, we're going to cross over to here, we're going to go up into the Galilee area, then we're going to go to Megiddo, we're going to go to a Roman city here called Caesarea, where Paul was imprisoned. Then we're going to drive up to Jerusalem. We'll see lots of stuff in Jerusalem. Where's Megiddo? Masada. It's down there. So we're going to go along the western side of the Dead Sea that we were looking at today, and we're going to stop at Qumran, where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. We're going to go to Masada, which is really neat. Major battles fought there. I mean, it's one of those magical places. And then we're coming back to Jerusalem. We'll see many things there. And then we'll cross back over, spend our night here, go down and see Sodom. And then we're going to drive along the Dead Sea and up that road we went today and have lunch on the rim of the Dead Sea. We'll watch it for the rest of the afternoon, and that's going to finish our trip. Okay?
I thought we were having tomorrow night at Scott's.
Oh, it is. It's up in Tiberias on the Sea of
Oh,
Galilee.
you had us over there.
We're going up there, yeah. We're crossing the border. That's why we're getting such an early start. We may get really held up. It may only take us 2 hours to get across. Sometimes it takes longer. And we have things we want to do on the other side on our way to Tiberias. Tiberias isn't much to see. Who built it?
Antipas.
Antipas built it. And then he
Herod's
also
son.
had a city down here. This is Perea. And this is Galilee. Those are the two areas that Antipas controlled. They're in your book. And I'll finish up the story of Antipas tomorrow, but it's kind of fun. He was a sleazy character. Great story. And that's 27 minutes. I said 30 minutes. Yeah.
John, do we get to get in the Dead Sea if we want to? Do we physically?
We're not
get
going to
in?
be anywhere where you can't get to the Dead Sea. And you wouldn't want to now. It's really cold. It's really cold, and it's no fun. I've done it one time, and I don't know why, and I would never do it again. It's one of those things where you think it would be fun to do once, and probably it is, and once you've done it, you're happy you did. But right now, in the winter, no, it's not really something to do.
Today I was trying to count up, you said, who knows how many people are descended from Herod?
Ah, anybody?
I got up to around 10.
10, that's great. What, descended from, did you include Herod the Great?
Yes.
Well, that's, okay, you're short one.
Uh,
There are 11. Herod, 3 sons, a grandson, that's King Herod in the book of Acts, a great-grandson, that's Agrippa, King Agrippa, and Bernice.
Ooh, that's everyone.
Now, Agrippa has a sister, Bernice, and he has another sister, no, Stella. Stella! No, he has another sister, and I'm drawing a blank right now. That's 8. But we have Herodias,
Right.
her husband Philip, and her daughter Salome. That's 11 that are related to Herod, including Herod the Great. 11 people in the Bible. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry to keep you, but...